Thanks, Eileen, and welcome everyone. As Eileen said, I'm in Chicago today, or in the Chicago area. It's nice and rainy out, 10 o'clock in the morning. But I know we have folks from around the country and around the world, so welcome. And today we're going to talk about integrated project delivery, IPD, for small projects. And a lot of these examples really feel like they're centered around healthcare. Healthcare is where I've built my business. But really, they are not project, or let's call it industry specific. The tools, methods, concepts, and ideas we're going to talk about today can be utilized across any project of any type. But we want to emphasize small projects, and we emphasize small projects because that's what we normally do in our everyday life. Most of us are not on these billion-dollar size projects. We're working in projects that are under $10 million a lot, and that's the vast array of what we see. So let's talk about how do we bring a lean and integrated project delivery mindset down to small projects. So this is me. You'll see a lot of my face today, so I won't stay on the screen for very long. But as Eileen said, I'm a vice president with Integrated Facilities Solutions. And here's my contact information. Please take a screenshot. Reach out to me. I'm a resource here. We function as an owner's representative, and I also work with a lot of teams as a lean coach or lean advocate. A lot of owner organizations have hired us and hired myself to help them kind of establish a lean culture and a lean process within their project teams. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. First is really about the idea of building a culture. So here's my information. Please reach out. Would love to talk to you. I could talk about this stuff all day. I've actually spent the last couple hours this morning talking about lean on a different platform. So just a little bit of background on who we are as an organization. Integrated Facilities Solutions. We're an owner's representative program management firm in Chicago. 20 people in our firm. We've been in business for almost 25 years. And you can see we've completed thousands of projects, billions of dollars worth of work. Successfully, mind you. We'd like to say that we were lean before lean was a thing, with the idea of integrating teams, and it really comes out in the name of our company as Integrated Facility Solutions. So being proactive, providing solutions, and this idea of being the orchestra conductor and helping owners really and contractor teams have more successful projects. How do we do that? We do that by bringing this idea and culture of collaboration together. So here are the big touching points for today. I start off this presentation talking about culture, and culture really driven by the owner. Owner organizations need to understand that if you want something or are expecting something on your projects, you are the driver of that culture. And then we're going to talk about the ideas of integrated project delivery, how that translates into a smaller project versus these huge billion-dollar type projects. And then we're going to take it even a deeper level into this idea of thinking big, but building small. And I'm talking about small, like $1 million size projects, small. And how do we do this repetitively so we find huge savings and huge benefits to the client? A lot of value is driven when we start to think about this. So the idea of culture first, then we're going to get into really the nuts and bolts of IPD, and then we're going to even get smaller into these $1 million retail space build-outs that we've performed on. So culture, and I say culture driven by the owner. As an owner's representative, we understand the importance of the owner sitting at the table. The owner has to be active in this process, or else I would say it doesn't work, or it won't be as successful as you want it to be. I was having a conversation with somebody this morning, and it was about the idea that, at the end of the job, we always have these little issues that crop up. Part of that is because the owner hasn't expressed what they want at the beginning of a project. Yes, we all want project success, but we have to drive a culture where this is created. So how do we do that? No, we do that early on. We're going to do that with the concept of validation. So validation is really about, and I have a nice little short case study at the end of the presentation about validation. The idea of validation is really the support of this business case. And we've always thought of the stool of construction as program or scope, schedule, and budget. Three legs to the stool that support business case. But why don't we add quality in there as a fourth element of supporting the business case? It's actually one of the most important, if not the most important, is quality. What type of quality are we asking for? Because then it'll inform us about the budget and the schedule and the program or the scope of work. Quality is so important, and it needs to be that fourth leg of the stool. Us as owner organizations need to talk about the idea of what type of quality are we asking for in our projects. And if we don't, the other three things, in my mind, it don't really matter. And so this is the beginning of that culture drive by the owner to talk about what kind of quality do we want to have built in inherently into our projects. So then we talk about a culture of project planning. So, you could see on the left-hand side here, we have our kind of waterfall Microsoft project type schedule that we always produce on projects. We need that. That's our baseline schedule. We need that as our roadmap. But when you look to the other side, leads as a team and as a driver of culture as an owner organization, we really want to drive teams into the idea of planning on a daily, weekly basis rather than looking at this big waterfall schedule. Because now what I've created is a culture of accountability. The men and women that are on our project sites and are standing in this photo are the ones that are accountable for what they're doing. Me as the owner, I have to drive that culture of accountability down to the work level force that is going to actually be putting the work together. So the last planners and the architects, the designers, the engineers, those individuals that are doing the work, I need to empower them to not only just say, hey, you need to be here when, but I need to ask them, when are you going to be here and what are you going to be performing today? And how are you going to hand this work off to the next person? Be respectful of that. Be mindful of that. It's my job as the leader of the project, as the owner of the project, to lead that culture, to say you are accountable for what you're doing. The next element that we talk about is design. So we've talked about for a long time the idea of designing for intent. So the floor plan on the left, that roof plan, shows the intent of the project. We need that. We need that 2D element. But I'm pushing now for my designers, my engineers, to design for fabrication, not just for intent. To think about constructability and to take constructability into account. But on the flip side, I need my contractor teams to support that and to provide good information back to the architect. And I, as the owner facilitator, am allowing this conversation to happen between these two entities. And if it's not happening, I need to push that. So again, this is a culture of bringing people to the table, not as adversaries, but as collaborators. So the designer is not being criticized for their design when they're designing for fabrication. Rather, they're being asked to look at things a little differently so that we can make it easier to build. And in the end game, easier to maintain for me as an owner. So I want my buildings to be maintained at a very high level. And if I don't build with the idea of fabrication and the idea of being able to get at a certain valve at a certain time, I have a problem. And so I need to facilitate and build the culture where these two organizations or multiple organizations can talk together. So this is really about the idea of risk assessments and tracking. And the picture on the left is setting ourselves up as adversaries. This is what we've always done in our project teams: point the finger, speak at a high volume against each other, and we're pitted against each other across the table. So I love that photo. What I really like better is the idea of sitting down and collaborating as a team. So we have a number of individuals sitting around a table talking about how do we manage risk on this project and how are we going to track that. And in our case, we use something called a risk opportunity tracker. It's nothing fancy. It's a spreadsheet. But what that spreadsheet does is it provides transparency about the things that we think are risks that are inherent on the project. Me as the owner of this project, I have to allow the team to be transparent and to be vulnerable. So this is, again, that culture. I'm building a culture that says we are allowing vulnerability between the different entities that sit around this table. Everyone has a forum to speak, and I'm not going to point my fingers and I'm not going to yell at them or say that their idea was stupid or whatever. What I'm going to do is put it on that spreadsheet and talk about the risks inherent with it, the pros and cons, and why it's important to make this decision. And then we're going to make a decision together and then move forward. So here's just a bigger blown up copy of this risk opportunity tracker so you can get a little better look at it. But you can see here what we're talking about is, delay start a project until spring to avoid winter conditions. You can see that there's a savings there of $20,000, but it was rejected because schedule, when I looked at the business case as the owner and I looked at the business case for this project, I said schedule is more important than those dollars. And so we're not going to go forward with that idea of starting in the spring to avoid winter conditions. In Chicago, everyone knows we got terrible winters. We'd have terrible summers. So in this case, it wasn't worth the savings. On the same time, the idea of eliminating a roof deck of concrete. So the idea that we would put in concrete, and I'm not going to go through each one of these, but you could see these are huge savings, but they're rejected because those ideas did not carry forth with what the building requirements were for quality, schedule, scope, and budget. So you have to understand all four of those things. And some of these things have to do with quality. So when we boil it down into culture, you can see the picture at the bottom of the page. People look like they're having fun. People look like they're collaborating together. We have people standing up and active and participating in these meetings and not just sitting on their phone, being distracted. We're in a room together for a short amount of time in each one of these pictures. We have to get a lot of work done. And in the case of this culture that was built in the picture at the bottom of the page, we have a big room, but we have big ideas in that room. And we allow those ideas to be talked about and heard and not just brought up and pushed to the side. I was talking to a group the other day about this idea of the suggestion box, and they had a survey that they sent out to all these people and said, hey, what do you think about, what do we do great on our projects and what should we improve upon? And that's a great way to build culture on your projects, but you need to listen to what they say. And they said, well, we put it aside and we didn't really pay attention to it. Now that doesn't do us any good. The culture of sharing and being heard is one where we should take that information and then utilize that information to our benefit to make things better. In the case of the picture on the upper left, these are small cluster groups that we established on a project team where we have a diverse group at each one of those tables talking about different elements within that risk register that we showed earlier. So each one of these groups is talking about either electrical systems, mechanical systems, the carpentry, and we're designing for fabrication, not just for intent. On that project in the upper left hand side of the screen, 0 RFIs related to changes needed in the field for products based on the design. 0 change orders for project related items that should have been caught during submittals. They were caught during the submittal process, caught during the BIM process, and we did not have any change orders related to field conditions because something we drew on the drawing needed to be changed when it got to the field. 0. That's powerful. That's the culture that I wanted to create. And that's how, so if you start with culture, that's how you get to the next level. That's how you're going to get to the idea of building with an integrated project delivery model. So some questions from the first part, and there really aren't, answers. We can answer these in a larger discussion afterwards. There's really no right or wrong answer, but the questions you should really be asking yourself are, how am I going to drive culture on my projects? How am I going to push this idea of a culture of collaboration on my projects? I'm a carpenter. How am I going to do that as a carpenter? How am I going to do that as an owner, an architect, a general contractor, et cetera? How am I going to push the culture of collaboration, the culture of accountability on my projects? so that I get better outcomes? How can we get away from the silos that we have on our projects? And what we're looking to do is always improve. We're looking for the idea of continuous improvement on our project cycles. So how can I shift away from the silo I normally work in to help improve my project outcomes? You know, there's another question here. How do we know we're making the right decisions? And that risk register really identified a lot of decision points that we had to make. How do we know we're making the right decisions? Because we do it together as a team. And then the last really big question, and this you'll see this question pop up a lot, is what role does the owner play on this team? And I think the first section of this presentation identified that the owner is extremely critical, extremely important. If you don't have the owner sitting at the table, there's so much value that's driven away from the project. And so we need to have the owner in the room. And how do we get the owner in the room? There's many ways to do it, but a lot of them have to do with just the idea of showing the owner that we're providing value to them by asking the right questions, by asking the questions about quality and schedule and scope and budget and looking for their priorities. What are their priorities? And asking them to be a participant in this project cycle that we have. So, yeah, I lay this out initially in the first, call it 15 or 20 minutes, talking about culture, because you can't just jump right into saying we're going to build a project using the integrated project delivery with the full integrated form of agreement contract and just hope it'll work. So you have to have this culture established within your organizations where you're allowing contractors to be successful. You're allowing your architects and engineers to be successful, make good decisions, have a seat at the table, have a voice being heard at the table, create that culture. Then the movement towards an integrated project delivery system is going to be less difficult and much more pleasurable for you as an owner organization. So let's talk about integrated project delivery for a second in the basic fundamental when you're talking about the contract. So, and really this can be relayed across small projects, large projects, et cetera. But in this case, we have two different types of contracts that really have been the foundation for the IFOA, or integrated form of agreement. And one is the tri-party agreement, which is really a contract between the owner, the architect, and the general contractor. And so that group forms the core team. Those are the signers of the contract: owner, architect, general contractor. So that's the tri-party agreement. So think about, in our traditional agreements, we have owner, architect, owner, general contractor, but the connection between architect and general contractor exists, but it doesn't exist in the same way it does when we get to an IFOA. In the IFOA, we're signing one agreement together saying we're part of this team. In our traditional contracts, we kind of pit ourselves against each other as adversaries, and we have different agendas. Now, in this case, we're aligning our agendas. And why did I start this presentation talking about culture? Because if you don't have a culture of collaboration and trust, you can't do this. You can't just say we're going to sign the contract. These are teams that you've worked with potentially for a long time, or teams that you feel really can participate at a very high level. So think about that. If you're doing lump sum contracts, the challenge for you is to get to a point where you're going to start signing GMP contracts. That's the next level of collaboration and trust. I trust my team, and I can move from a lump sum contracting method to a contracting method of a GMP type contract. If you're an owner organization working with GMP contracts, now you're ready. You're there. You're basically there to get to the point where you could do an IFOA. And I think what you'll find as we go through these deliverables is it doesn't have to be scary. You don't have to be afraid of it, because it really isn't. It's the evolution of the GMP contract. It's not anything brand new. The poly-party agreement is one where you have more than 3 individuals. And I laid out an example here of what we've done on small projects with the owner, architect, general contractor, but I also include the electrical engineer and mechanical engineer as part of our core team. So those entities and those organizations are signing the contract. And the reason why I split them out away from being underneath an architect, it really has to do with the concept of making sure they have a seat at the table. The engineers are very highly intelligent people that need to be at the table for a lot of the decisions we make. Because a lot of the decisions we make as a design team and contractor team affect them immensely. They're involved in every decision we make. If we want to change the glazing spec on our project, it involves a mechanical electrical engineer from a lighting and a heating and an HVAC perspective. So why shouldn't they be in the room when we're having this conversation? You know, we kind of jokingly say that the tri-party agreement is taxation without representation, because those entities like the engineers and the trade partners that work for either the general contractor or the architect don't have a seat at the table, but they're being asked to put profit at risk. So the thing to understand is, in an IFOA, anyone around the core team is being asked to put their profit at risk. And the owner puts a contingency in to protect that profit. That's the owner's profit. So the owner is putting a contingency in to protect the core team's profit. In the case of the poly-party agreement, the electrical and mechanical engineer now have a seat at the table. So they're represented at our higher level, putting their profit at risk. The trade partners that work for the general contractor, though, are still sitting outside the circle. And what we found is that adding them to the circle and having more team members sign that contract, there comes a point when it isn't as beneficial as you would think. The movement of dollars across the board, if we have more than 5 people signing this contract, then we have to get everyone to sign off on everything we do as a core team. So our agreement says the core team has to make decisions with consensus, or else we're not going to move forward. So the more people you have sitting around the table, the more difficult it could become to make decisions. So you have to draw the line somewhere, and we felt like we drew the line at the general contractor level. We've had trade partners sit at our core team. So we've had a contract, a poly-party agreement with 7 signers of the contract. It became difficult for us to manage, especially on a project that was under $10 million. So I would say, you know, it's not a one-size-fits-all section here. Tri-party agreement is comfortable for some, poly-party for others on different levels and different scales. But again, anyone sitting around the core team is asked to put all of their profit at risk in order to ensure that this project is going to come in supporting that business case, supporting the budget and scope and schedule and quality that we're asking for. So you can see here there are trade partners, and we call our subcontractor team trade partners. And we call them trade partners for a reason, because they're our partners. And you can see as an example those that we would bring to the table on a building similar to this one in the background here. These are the types of contractors that I would bring to the table during that session. So electrical, all of our MEP trades, the carpentry drywall contractor, the steel contractor, those are the ones that are going to be able to not increase the risk on a project, but actually lower it by sitting at the table. All these trade partners are also risk reward partners. So they're putting their profit at risk to sit at the table or to be represented by the contractor, but to help us make good decisions. With that set of key players at the table, I can now design for fabrication and not just for intent, because I'm having key conversations between the electrical engineer and electrical contractor about how to build this building so that it works, not just build the building to get it done quickest. Again, when we talk about the idea of the integrated form of agreement, IPD, integrated project delivery, we have to talk about bringing trade partners on. And I like to use the terminology of the rapid trade partner integration, getting people on board quickly. So I have 2 different kind of case study or scenarios here. One is we send out for qualifications. We ask those trade partners to put together a proposed budget for their scope of work. We're asking what their overhead and profit is, and we give them a 30-minute interview. And we're choosing those team members based on value. Not necessarily saying, oh, they submitted the lowest budget, so we should pick them, or their overhead and profit dollar values are the lowest, so we should pick them. This is a 2-week process for us to go through and select all of the, again, this is the carpentry contractor, the steel contractor, and all of our MEP contractors for a project, again, under $10 million, 2-week process. We keep the competitive spirit alive, and we don't have to go through a lengthy, arduous ordeal where we're designing our drawings, bidding the project, then value engineering the project, and then selecting our team members in that case. We trusted that these team members were the right team members for us, and that's why we went forward with them. The secret here is it's no different on a large scale project or a small scale project. I think the idea with IPD for small projects is we have to be nimble. We have to understand that these team members have a lot of other projects they're working on, not just ours. And so I have to be conscious of their time. So 30-minute interview, right? If I'm interviewing 2 contractors per trade, that's 12 interviews. And I'm asking the entire core team back here, this team of 5 people, to be at the table during each one of those 12 interviews. So I'm the owner, I'm asking architect, the GC, the electrical engineer, mechanical engineer. The 5 of us are going to sit through 12 30-minute meetings. That's 6 hours of time. It's a lot of time, but it's valuable to me as the owner to pay for it. But I have to be cognizant of that because I'm asking for an entire day for my core team to devote to selecting our team members. It may seem like a lot, or it may not seem like a lot, but think about that as you're doing this process. Keep that interview to 30 minutes. Be concise. This is not a $5 billion new hospital project or new building, new campus, whatever. We're talking about a $10 million project. In a 30-minute interview, we should be able to understand what they're going to bring to the table that's valuable, and if they're going to be the right team member for us. Now, in another scenario, again, under $10 million project, you can see some similarities between who we hired for this particular project. They were joined at the second meeting that we ever had on this project. So at the first meeting, the architect, engineer, and general contractor were there. And we said, we want to pick these team members, and we picked them. We didn't ask for proposals. We didn't ask for interviews. I built a culture of trust and collaboration with these organizations, and so I felt comfortable just bringing them right to the table. Small project, don't have years to work on this together. We need to be nimble. We need to be fast. And so be prepared to do that potentially. Be prepared to trust, right? You can't do this if we don't trust that what they're going to bring to the table are really good ideas. And what you find between the 2 teams is there's repetition there. So I'm bringing people back that understand what I want as an owner organization, what they understand with the contractor, or what the architects and the general contractor and engineering teams want. And that's why we're bringing them back to the table. So don't be afraid to bring that group back. If they performed for you well in the past, bring them back, reward them for that. That's one idea of how we can do this on small projects where we're not wasting a lot of time and effort and energy because we don't have that time, effort, and energy. So, just kind of going through a timeline here of how we do project delivery and then how we're doing cost checking. Because if we bring a team to the table initially, right during conceptual development, how do I know I'm getting the right price? I need to continually check the price as we're doing the design. So I show there kind of the traditional stage gates of conceptual development, schematic development, design development, construction documents, and construction. These elements of where we lock in the EMP, which is like a GMP, it's the estimated maximum price. It's our contract value for the big IFOA. As I bring that team in, I can do any of these things along any part of the spectrum. The point I'm making with this slide is you see how early we're doing a lot of this stuff. Target value delivery is beginning As soon as I bring the team on board, as I develop a schematic design, I'm looking at price. I'm checking price as I go through schematic design, design development, and I'm trying to erase some of these stage gate lines that we've created over time to make the process more fluid. I start doing submittals before construction documents are even completed, and I'm starting the BIM process then too. I want submittals done. Why do a submittal if the team is involved in the design? What good is the submittal? The submittal is a formal document then to just say, to document what we're putting into the project. So the submittal process should be very simple at this point, not very difficult. Again, when we're looking at acting fast and acting nimble, I need to be able to react quickly. A lot of this is happening in meetings like the cluster group you saw earlier in the presentation. This is a 2-hour meeting that happens once a week. And I have to make decisions. I have to do the submittal process. I have to start talking about target value design and delivery process. And how are we going to function in the 3D model? When are we going to start doing that? When is soon enough? You can even move these items further up into the project delivery. All in the schematic design is really where we're starting a lot of these different things. And again, the thing to emphasize here also is we need to really focus on cost checking throughout our entire project cycle. This construction cycle, for as an example, we had a project, the strategic need was identified in June of 2 years ago. We came back with a conceptual design floor plan by the beginning of July. So July 1st, I am handed a schematic design, roughly schematic design from the client, working with our architect over a couple meetings. And I'm asked by the client to get this project done by December 15th of that same year. I have an elevator to order. I have 2 large air handlers to order. I have a decorative stair to order, and I have 5.5 months to do all of that. Plus, I have to finish the design, go in for permit, get all the pricing, and on top of that, procure all the materials. How am I going to do that? Well, this is a $5 million project. I don't have time to sit there and like cohabitate to a site and I bring together the team that I trust. I onboard that team immediately. And then I start I move that submittal process all the way to the beginning for the key elements that I know I'm going to need to order, like an elevator. So we're able to finish a project in 5.5 months using a IPD on a $5 million project with savings back to the client because we still found ways to innovate. Bringing the team in early. I'm starting BIM and submittals as soon as possible, immediately in the case of the elevator. The second meeting was, okay, who's the elevator vendor? Let's get them in here. Let's talk to them about how long it's going to take to get an elevator, because we know we need to procure that. What type of air handlers are we putting in the building? Let's make those decisions now and get them out of the way, get them ordered so that we can keep going. In that case, understanding the client's need around the 4 legs of the stool, schedule number 1, right? We need to understand that and have that expectation set from the outright. But a $5 million project that I finished in 5.5 months is only done because I trusted the team that I brought to the table, and I did this as an integrated project delivery contract. No other way to do a project like that, because we would be sitting here designing and bidding and building for months and months past my December 15th end date. That's the power of this big project, small project. But when you think about a nimble team that can react quickly, only way to do this, bring my trusted team together and go forth with that mindset. In this case, we're talking about dashboards and how are we going to act in a transparent fashion to our client? Small project, large project, I don't care what kind of project you have, having a dashboard that identifies where you're at in the project. Where are we at in schedule? Where are we at in our key performance indicators on the project? How are we doing on our PPC week over week? where are we at in the risk reward pool and how it's building or how it's being depleted? Where are we at in our risk reward partner forecasts? At the bottom of this page, we have forecasts for each of our team members saying, where are you at in your cost, your current budget versus what you're forecasting? And you can see here the line is drawn between August and September for this particular project. In this case, the architect is in the red. So how do we get the architect back out of the red? We look at the overall bottom line and say the entire project team is delivering below budget. So that's okay. We as a team can pick up the architect when they're slipping, because other team members are saying, I'm doing fine. I can give dollars back to the bottom line. Fantastic. You don't see that on typical project deliveries. And again, this is a $10 million project in this example, $10 million project where we have ups and downs along the way. But what we're finding is we're managing to the bottom line and we're forecasting savings back to the client. Let me zoom in a little bit here on these KPIs. When we talk about PPC, our confirming RFIs is a huge one. RFI response time, our submittal response time. And I challenge you to say we can do these even better than what we show here. Small project, large project, doesn't really matter. But if we don't have key performance indicators, our small projects are going to fail because we don't have a lot of time to make up. On a large project, $1 billion, 2-year project, we have lots of time. We have time to make up where we're slipping. On a 5.5-month project where I need to get $5 million worth of work done in 5.5 months, I have no time to slip. Key performance indicators then become hugely important in that scenario. I have to be measuring ourselves every single day. What am I doing? How am I performing? Because if I'm not, I don't want to say I'm going to go back to that adversarial picture earlier on in the presentation and point my finger and say it's your fault. What I'm going to do is say, how as a team can we be better? Here's our goal and here's what we're currently tracking. How can we do better? And the only way I'm going to react on a small project is I'm going to see this information. I can get this daily if I need to and start to react quickly rather than waiting for those lagging indicators a month or 2 months down the road. I don't have that much time. So the key thing is understanding as a team, what key performance indicators are we going to establish? And then how are we going to track them? And then what are we going to do as countermeasures if we start to see slips or start to fall down on the project? How are we going to pick ourselves back up as a team, as a group? And that's why the dashboard is so important for
John,
small
I'm going to
projects
interrupt you for just a second, if you don't mind.
Sure.
We had somebody
Absolutely.
ask, because this is exactly what we're talking about right now, what does PPC stand for? There's somebody that's not familiar with that term and says
PPC is planned percent complete. So think about a PPC is, we have 20 tasks to complete in a week. That's what we put on our board. And we say, we're going to do these 20 things this week. And if we finish 15 of them, right, that's, if my math is correct, that's like 80% PPC. So we did 15 of the 20 things we said we were going to do. So it's planned percent complete. So you can see on our graph here, Eileen, at 100% that we did everything we said we were going to do. I tend not to agree with that because we never get everything done that we said we were going to do. And if we're doing that, we're not pushing ourselves hard enough. So you can see our PPC, our planned percent complete average, our goal is 85%. We feel like if we're hitting 85%, we're doing a pretty good job because we know there are going to be delays. We know there's going to be issues. Right now we're experiencing huge delays and issues when it comes to raw materials. We see it I'm seeing it with furniture on project where I can't get couches made in time for a project delivery. And we've known about this for a while. We are seeing huge delays in steel. So if we miss a delivery of a product to the site and on our weekly work plan, we said we were going to install this particular product and it didn't get installed. When it moves to the next week or whenever it moves out, it's going to we're going to miss that. We're going to miss that. And that's how we track our PPC or planned percent complete. So that item that we said we were going to finish, we couldn't finish. And therefore it's a miss, and it goes on our PPC as a miss.
Thank you, John. I appreciate your stopping for us.
Yeah, of course. Here's that idea of, now in real life, bringing the idea of intent, design for fabrication rather than intent into real life. This is the idea of prefab. Now, do we prefab everything? No, but we've been prefabbing things for a really long time. We just didn't call it prefab. Millwork in essence is prefabbed because I'm putting it together in a shop and I'm bringing it to my site and installing it. In this case, on the left, we have our head walls. Early prefab design on a head wall would then lead to the construction of that head wall in the shop to be brought out to the field. But what you're finding is what's really important about this idea of fabrication and the idea of designing for fabrication is, will it fit? Will I be able to service it? Will it work when I put it into place? And the question, sometimes the answer is not always, but in the case of small projects where we need to be quick, if I can design that head wall or this upper page that's a boiler room, and I can design these things, the VAV boxes with all the controls on them and all the coils on them and everything else put into place already, if I can do that in a shop, bring it out to the field, now I've found a huge advantage. So prefab is not just for big projects. Prefab is for every project of some. And I'm not talking about prefab meaning the entire bathroom and we slide it into the building. We don't have that luxury on a small project. But what we do have the luxury on is things like those VAV boxes. I have projects now where I have a cart that has light fixtures slotted in the cardboard box on this cart, but there are no other parts and pieces. You pull the light fixture out and you put it in the room, and the cart is labeled which light fixture goes in which room. So as the product is being released and brought into the shop, the electricians are doing that in their shop so that when it comes to the site, I can install it quickly. That's how we save time, especially on small projects, how we save time, because time is so critical. Let's do this in a controlled environment and then bring it to the field. And I can only do that if I really bring in my trade partners early. I trust the process, and I think about this idea of designing for fabrication rather than just for intent. I don't have time to ask the RFIs all the time. I don't have the time to sit there and spend weeks and weeks doing submittal reviews. That's why we want our submittals reviewed in 5 days or less. We want RFIs are insanely expensive. We want RFI response time to be 3 days or less. And we want half of our RFIs on our PPs, on our key performance indicators here. We want half of our RFIs to come in that are confirming, that come with a solution already attached to it. That's how we collaborate at a high level, especially during a small project cycle where we don't have a lot of time. I talked about Last Planner. I won't get in depth into Last Planner because, again, I think the main thing I want to emphasize here is there's accountability that resides here. And the picture on the left-hand side, you can see, it's very hard to see, but in the far left-hand edge of that picture, there are categories. And those categories identify how we missed on our performance. And what we want to do is look at that and identify the reasons and areas why we're missing, and then do something about it so we learn. This is a 3-week look ahead. Typically, you would see a 6-week look ahead. On a small project, I'm going to narrow that focus down maybe to 3 weeks out. And then the last board you see on this picture on your left is one that is looking at a bigger topic. So we go micro and we go macro. And the macro level is looking far out, maybe to the end of the project, if that's the case. And as this project cycles through, I'm now going to be able to pick up that macro and bring it to a micro level. But I'm not going to micro level out 6 weeks. It's a waste of my time, especially in a small project. So I'm going to look at it and say, I'm only going to identify the daily tasks I have for 3 weeks out, because things are ever changing and it's moving so fast. But what I do need to do is schedule out the next 3 months after that 3 weeks and identify all the key players that are going to be there. I don't want to waste their time being in the room doing a 6-week pull plan. I want to be as efficient and as cognizant of people's time as possible. Because on a small project, our project managers especially are working on multiple projects at the same time, so they can't sit in 3-hour pull planning sessions. This needs to be a 15 to 30-minute meeting. In the picture on the right, we're maybe doing a little longer range planning, and that's why we're in the room with more of us in the room thinking longer term about a project. In this case, before it even gets to the field, we're sitting out in an office area looking at it. The one on the left is inside the trailer. So we're building the project. We have 5 people there collaborating. We don't need 50. Think about that. Be very cognizant about who your key stakeholders are on a small project and bring those key stakeholders into the room. Don't invite everybody that doesn't need to be there. Don't bring the painter when you're talking about the first week of the project when it's 5 months down the road. Put a tag on that micro level schedule that says painter needs to be here 2 months from now. And then as the project moves forward, now you need to start calling that painter or the flooring contractor out to start thinking about where they're at in the project cycle. Very key distinction on a small project when you have the ability to make this a 3-week, 4-week, 5-week look ahead schedule. There's nothing that says it has to be a 6-week look ahead schedule with daily work tasks laid out for all 6 weeks. And we found that when we started to do that on this $10 million project, it was too cumbersome and things were changing all the time. And it was a waste of time to go that far out. So the rules are there to be modified, bent a little bit. The rules of the last planner system really are all about getting the last planners in the room. And so you have the ability to adjust when you need to, and be mindful of that, especially when you're building projects under $10 million. You have to be nimble. You have to be able to adjust. So in this case, here's our key performance indicators. Plan percent complete, 85%. The RFIs, the submittal time, those 0 lost time accidents. We want to be safe as well as quick. So when we're talking about transparency, and the reason why the picture is a little off, this was taken out on a project site where this board was hanging on the wall. You open the trailer door and you see this board. The first thing you see when you walk in is this. So this identifies to everybody on the project when they walk in, this is our roadmap. This is how we're measuring ourselves every day. We want everyone that walks in that door to be able to walk home at night and not have an accident, not have an injury. That's important. And so we put it out there to be transparent to the entire team. RFI times, this is our expectation. We're setting an expectation. So a lot of owners, right, that culture early on that we built, we need to set expectations for how we want the project to be delivered. And if we don't set that expectation, which is this board, it won't be delivered because we're not going to get what we want. But if we put it out there for everyone to see, the expectation would be that now that you've seen that, now we have to find ways and create ways for us to then deliver. And how did we deliver? In this case, you saw it on the dashboard. Here's our goals on the left. Here's what we actually did on the right. And, we were able to achieve a better PPC, a better confirming RFI percentage. We missed a little bit on our RFI response time and our submittal time. Again, on projects that are short duration, we need to make sure we're doing things quickly. Not everything's a fire drill, but we want to be mindful and respectful of the time. We're not going to be submitting flooring samples on the day one of the project, because that submittal is probably going to sit there for 30 days. We're going to be mindful of what we're submitting and when we're submitting. One of the most important things as an owner is really that idea of lost time accidents. We had 0. Everyone that came on that job went home to see their families, to see their loved ones every single day. That's powerful. And so, yeah, we found things that we have to improve upon. But think about if you're getting submittals back in a week. How powerful is that compared to what the industry standard is of 2 weeks? We need to allow 2 weeks for everyone to do their job. Well, In a fast-moving small project, you don't have time for that. So we have to set the expectation that we want submittals back in 5 days. And hopefully we get them. And in this case, it took us 6 days, but we were close. We were close, but we have now a ways to improve. And I would say the improvement would be, don't put 5 days again on my next goal for my next project. I would put 4 days and see if I can beat 4 days. Make it a little, push the envelope a little bit, right? Make it, what if we didn't have submittals? What if we were able to do the submittals while we were doing the design? Then my submittal time is 0 because I'm doing it as I'm designing. Extreme thought, but push the envelope, push this team, see what they can do, see how they can perform. But if you don't set an expectation and set the culture where I'm saying, here are the expectations I want, you're not going to get what you want. We need to be very clear, especially when we're talking about small projects. Again, key players, this was the second half of that poster. Look at the bottom number 4. Each team member considers this a successful project and finishes with a profit. So these are the conditions of satisfaction. This is the lagging indicator. This is the end of the day. How am I going to feel when I finished the project? Right? And if we say to the team members, we want you to feel like this was a successful project, and we want you to finish with a profit. That's what the IPD world allows us to say and do, is we want teams to finish with a profit. And I can write that right into the contract, because now we're motivated not by profit, but by making good decisions, and we will finish with a profit if we make good decisions as a team. Using all the tools that we just talked about, all the collaborative tools we just talked about, all center around the idea that we are going to finish this project with a profit and consider it to be a success. And we did. We finished ahead of schedule. We finished with savings. We're increasing the profit pool by 85% or more. So that means the teams are more profitable. The client is getting money back. The client is getting a project ahead of schedule traditionally. And so those are powerful things that happen. Especially on small projects, this is huge. Because sometimes that's where we probably feel like we don't make a lot of money. And so if we have the opportunity to make good decisions for us and for the client, we're going to see potential profit increases for the team. And so small projects become less cumbersome and more fun to be on. So kind of this part two section is the integrated form of agreement scalable? How small can we go? And in my case, I would say, I've been asked this question a lot, and I think it's about $1.5 million. I think is about the bottom line right now, where I would sign the integrated project contract, the integrated form of agreement, the tri-party contract. I think about $1.5 million is probably as low as I would go. And the reason why I say that is because now we're getting into the idea of all of the bookkeeping that takes place when we're talking about shared risk and reward pools. It may not be worth it to bring a team in at a lower dollar value than that. And the next part of this presentation really talks about that scale. Onboarding our teams. How do we do that without creating silos? We do that by this interview process where I bring in team members and I have the design team sitting with the contractor team while we choose our team members. What kind of culture do we need in order to make this contract successful? Well, I talked about the culture of trust, collaboration, setting expectations. That leads into the last question, which is what role does the owner play? You are the expectation setter. You are the allower of collaboration and accountability on your projects. Allow the teams to be free to do that. Give them this situation that says, July 1, you get a schematic design. December 15th, I want the project done. Go forth with me is sitting with you, leading from behind, let's say, sitting with you at the table. Tell me how we're going to do this collaboratively. What kind of contract do you need? What kind of key performance indicators are we going to track in order to get that done in 5.5 months, where all I've given you is a floor plan? That's it. Okay, you want to order an elevator tomorrow? Let's do it. Let's go. That's where the owner comes into play, because they can authorize and approve those dollars being spent. So the last part of the contract, this presentation today, is really about the idea of integrated project delivery now going into an even smaller project world. I'm talking about projects that are under $1 million. And I call them integrated project delivery. I use the term integrated project delivery for these projects. They may not have the integrated form of agreement, but what they have is all of the tools that we just talked about. The idea of building a culture, the idea of building this team, the idea of repetitive work and target value delivery, and all these things now translate into doing something at an even smaller scale. Our client came to us and said, the future of healthcare is moving to a retail space, and there's a lot of words and press around that. The idea of, in Chicago, for instance, on the lower right-hand side, outpatient visits are going down for community hospitals. Even in the outpatient centers, people are not visiting. They want something that's different. Millennials want something that's different. They don't want a traditional doctor's office that they're going to go to. And so it's beneficial for us to think of new ways to do projects and to deliver projects. How does this tie into a lean IPD world? Well, I'm gonna show you how we do this. So the client comes to us with the business case, right? Remember the stool. The business case is at the top of the stool, and it says we need to be the leader in this concept of these immediate care sites. And so we're going to spread these out around our geography as a new front door to the organization, a place where people can come that is comfortable and is built with quality, but it's built in a non-traditional healthcare environment. And so how do we do that? Well, we do that by building something that we would call a retail health clinic versus a traditional emergency department. And you can see the pluses on the side of what retail health brings versus what a traditional emergency department brings. And there's benefits to both. But when the client says to us, here's our business case, help us support it, we have to think about, how am I going to build a collaborative team that can work at a very high efficiency, but build this at the lowest cost possible. So I may not be signing an integrated form of agreement, but what I am doing is bringing a team together that has a culture of collaboration. So where did we start on this with this project team? We started by looking at the core values of each of these organizations that we worked with. And what we found was a common theme between the core values. This is the culture of the team that we were creating. And that team had a culture of teamwork and respect. At the center of all of our core values are teamwork and respect. So these are common theme elements between the owner, the architect, the general contractor, and the owner's representative. So at the center of this picture is the idea of teamwork and respect. That's what we're bringing together that's the type of culture we're trying to build on these very small projects. So we're talking about projects that are under $1 million in construction. Integrated project delivery for small projects under $1 million. Now, we don't have an integrated form of agreement, but what we do have is everything else. We're using data to drive the design by using an evidence-based design process. So we're looking at the actual data to help drive the design, not just guessing. We're taking really sound, good information from surveys and asking the right questions and then taking that feedback. Creating a spa-like environment is what millennials want in their healthcare settings. So how do we do that? The other thing we do is we bring in the key stakeholders. And again, I talked about it early on. Who are the key stakeholders and when do they need to be in the room? In this case, these were user groups that needed to be in the room as the key stakeholders to talk about design. What are we going to bring to our design? What colors, what aspects are we going to bring to the design? And again, we're doing this quickly. We're doing this these are 10-week projects that we have to build. How are we going to do this? So as we design, we talk about a set program, the kit of parts, using flexible design elements like prepackaged lighting systems, things like that, pre-approved vendors. So we trust that the vendor we're specifying can deliver the product that we need in the time frame we need it. And what it's going to reduce is defects. It's going to reduce waiting because we know that the vendor we want is going to bring the product we want when we need it. So we don't need to do a lot of the things we could see here in our downtime section. Here's what we're reducing it as a waste on projects like this. This is a very small project scale. We have 11 weeks to build this. How are we going to do an 11-week project when sometimes these lead times of these materials take longer than 11 weeks? So we developed checklists. Remember what I talked about earlier about building it, setting an expectation and then delivering on that expectation. How do I know what the client wants and what the landlord wants if I don't set a checklist that says, here is what I'm expecting? And these are all in small existing buildings in a retail setting that aren't meant to have designed or meant to house a healthcare client. Now, it could be any type of client that has any sophistication or complexity to it. It doesn't have to be healthcare. What if you wanted to put a data hub into that space where you needed a lot of electrical and mechanical infrastructure? How would you do that effectively in a space like this? You would have to look at the electrical and mechanical systems. And that's why we develop these checklists, because the checklist tells us this is what we're expecting and looking for in an existing building. And if it doesn't have it, we need to pick a new building. So we bring the team in early on in the process, and then you can see this is the end result of what it looks like when we're done. It's modern. It provides the spa-like feel that the client needs. So in design, we can take the design and translate that into the construction world. You know, some of the tools that we're going to use, the lean tools that we're going to use that we've talked about throughout the last hour, how do we determine cost certainty? And look at the idea of onboarding trade partners early in the process. We talked about this when we were doing the full IFOA contract. And in this case, we're signing GMP contracts, but we're still bringing trade partners on board early. This is when they have the most influence on a project, when the dollars that we're spending are at the lowest. So there's a lot of influence the trade partners can make. And in this case, on these very small projects, we're bringing those same trade partners from one project to the next. So we have consistency across our team. So we have benchmark costs, and we baseline those individuals and those organizations to say, your benchmark is X number of dollars per square foot or whatever it might be. And we are going to monitor you as you go through this project cycle. We're talking about a dozen projects that we've built this way together as a team. We're going to monitor you. And if you start to come off the rails and go above or below where you said you were going to be on your budgets, now we have a problem. We need to address it. So setting that cost benchmark early is a way for us to use that as a key performance indicator, right? So we have cost transparency. It's out there. Everyone understands it. And then we can identify if there's a problem quickly rather than waiting till the end of the project and saying, well, hey, we ran out of money. Sorry, here's a change order. No, not in this case. We talked about the idea of pre-construction checklists. Here's some examples of things that we need to do very early on. And so what I'm doing is I'm bringing the trade partner team in on these very small retail spaces. I'm bringing trade partners and engineers on site while I'm still negotiating the lease. I'm allowing some cost to be spent very early on because I know I won't get the project done otherwise. Use that as a tactic on a small project. Get the team in there, even as you're doing, know that you might sink some costs in, but the cost benefit outweighs that possibly that wasted cost, if you will, or that throwaway cost. Let's say we don't sign the lease and I brought some engineers out for one day and a contractor team out for a half a day to look at something. So that's a couple $1,000s I may have spent, but you know what? If it keeps me moving forward in the right direction, I'm willing to spend it. So be willing to be flexible on that front if you have to, because in this case, schedule was also paramount to this process. We need to get these buildings open quickly. We use choosing by advantages as another lean aspect we use when we talk about the selection of materials. When can materials be on site? Which should I provide, furniture systems or a traditional millwork system? Who can fabricate it faster and get it to the site quickest? So do I look at cost or do I look at speed? Support of that business case stool of quality, scope, schedule, and budget, right? I have to understand at this point, which one of those four things am I willing to compromise on in order to get the project done on time? Think about that when you're being small project mindset with a nimble mindset. I am going to have to maybe make some tough decisions. How am I going to make those tough decisions? Elimination of waste. In this case, in these projects, we eliminated the RFI process basically. Because I'm there so early, I'm just asking questions in an organic method. I'm ordering bulk materials. I know there's a dozen projects to go. So I'm going to order materials for all 12 projects that I know I can safely order right now to reduce that delivery time when it comes to it. And this is important now more than ever, because if I need to order 50 light fixtures for a particular project, and I know I have 10 more projects, why don't I order 500 light fixtures right now so that I know I have that material in hand when it's supposed to be here? Now I'm not going to be waiting. So what? I have a little bit of inventory, but you know what? That inventory is important right now in a global economy when things are really tight. The reduction of change orders is huge because if I bring a trade partner in early in the process, what bogs down our jobs all the time? All these change orders, all this fighting about cost. If I bring a trade partner in early and they're doing surveys while my engineering team is there, while I'm signing the lease, now I'm designing for fabrication and not for intent. And I've reduced the concept of even a change order coming up. The only change orders we had on these jobs was a credit at the end of the job for the dollars that they didn't need that they were giving back to the client. That's powerful. So this slide is really all about the ideas of incentives and how do I use lean tools on small projects. I'm going to use a GMP contract for something like this rather than a IFOA. But what I am doing is I'm telling the team, I'm using you as my mutually agreed project partner, and we have repetitive projects. The incentive is I have repetitive projects. I'm not bidding them. I'm not rebidding your project over and over again. Every time we get a set of drawings, we're not bidding a project. We're just putting a budget to it and we go. Because we trust that the benchmarks we've set earlier on are being held. And if they're not held, that's when I have the trigger to say I need to maybe make a different selection on the contractor. So target value delivery, each of the projects is a very similar target value based on square footage of the building. And so I know kind of going in what my dollar value bogey is going to be, and I can just work off of that. Purposefully selecting materials is that idea of choosing by advantages. Is the advantage that it looks great or that I can get it here on time and it looks pretty good? What's the advantage? How do I weigh those advantages out? Especially in a small project, I need to know quickly if I can get something or not. And I have to make some hard choices. But that's the idea of choosing by advantages. Sometimes you have to make hard choices, and how are these things weighing out against each other? But I also, as an owner, have to give clear and concise and decisive direction. And then the idea of savings to the bottom line, we'll talk about that in a minute. The client came to us and said, this collaborative approach, we want to build 50 of these immediate care sites over the next number of years. So right now we built a dozen of them. And what you can find is that at the top line, it says series 1, but the top line is our budget. And the bottom line is our cost per square foot on the actual build. And you can see the first, call it 3 or 4 projects. We're very close to the line. We're running right on the line because we haven't learned yet. But as we start to learn, we start to see this gap open. And the gaps is there all the way through. What does that mean for the client? It means the client is getting efficiencies by having the same project teams working on their projects all the time. And I'm not talking about the same contractors. I'm talking about the same field personnel. The trade partners that are actually doing the work are the same carpenters and electricians, drywallers, plumbers, you name it. They're going from one job to the next job. That's where I see real efficiency. but I have to have built a culture of collaboration and trust, or else it doesn't work. So what are those results, or what is the innovation that I have? I've dropped almost $2 million to the bottom line over 12 projects. Some would say we overestimated, but I look at it and say that I've been able to innovate so well over those 12 projects that I've dropped enough money to the bottom line to build almost 2 of them. That's powerful. The sites are going live when they said they would. Now, the reason why is we set an expectation early on of what we wanted to deliver, and then we actually were able to have the tools provided to us to deliver. The tools that say, I'm willing to spend a few dollars to have a team go out to the site and really investigate the site before I decide to pay for that lease. That's an integrated project delivery model on a very small project. So some would say, wow, you dropped $2 million to the bottom line. So what, $2 million in a $6 billion organization or whatever it is, who cares? But $2 million is powerful because $2 million buys almost 2 of these sites. So we're finding enough savings drop to the bottom line that we're being able to provide additional projects to the client. And when that savings isn't coming from beating up the contractors and lowering their prices, it's coming from those innovations. You see the idea of 30 innovations carried forward. Those are innovations around the light fixture packages, that blue wall that you see in the background of that middle picture. That wall has gone through 5 different iterations. We weren't satisfied with the first one, and we kept going. We said, okay, how are we going to build this wall so that it really gives the pop and effect that we want? And then we look at it, I have this idea of small wins. I look at that and say, if I can modify that and improve that for the next X number of projects, I've created a small win for the client. And I carry that forward over and over again. And that's how I save $2 million on small projects. So not only are we providing cost certainty and schedule certainty, we're actually being able to find some savings along the way by innovating and by bringing that team from one project to the next. I talked about cost and schedule certainty. Look at the one over on the other side of the page here about enjoyable process. This is really enjoyable. This is exciting when you get to do this, where you can say that the team was profitable, the team innovated, the team created new standards and a new way to build things. Integrated project delivery on a very small project, where we were able to create a process that was enjoyable. We loved working on projects like this. These are the best projects we do. They're tough and they're fast, but you know what? When we sit back at the end of the day and say, man, we dropped $2 million to the bottom line for the client, that's enjoyable. That's enjoyable for everybody involved, especially the owner who's looking at it and saying, great, I have more money now to build more sites. So integrated project delivery doesn't always need the IFOA, the integrated form of agreement. You can build a project with a GMP, but with the right team culture. That's why it's capitalized. Team culture has to be there in order for this to work. Does project size matter? It really doesn't. I think what we displayed with this presentation today is really that no matter what size project you're on, you can build with good thought process, lean tools, lean methodology, and it is integrated project delivery, because we're bringing a team together and integrating them early on in the process. And on small projects, it's so critical to make good decisions quickly and get through that and keep moving forward. So we're not just doing lean, I put that in quotes. We are being lean because this is how we function and how we act. And I think we've now understood how important the role of the owner is on teams like this. The owner is at the table constantly, consistently. And if we don't get our owners there, if we don't have our owners there, us as contractors and architects and trade partners and vendors, our role to get the owner there is to show them these wins that we have. Show them how we drop $2 million to the bottom line by being transparent, by being honest about what things cost, how long they take to get. Be vulnerable and it will work for you. And that's how you get more owners to the table. The last slide I have here is really about the idea of validation. So this is a project we're working on with American Family Insurance. This is an office building project with an integrated project delivery approach. And what I want to talk about is the importance of validation in any size project. You can see here in a traditional process on a project, it would take us 13 to 14 months to go through the design, the bidding, and the value engineering process, and probably cost us around $5 to $6 million. This is a $60 million project. And during that value engineering process, we have a lot of waste, which is the idea of redesign is waste. In a lean process, the validation period takes us 5 months. And what we understand after the validation period is, what is this project? We can say with certainty after the validation period how much this project is going to cost, how long it's going to take to build, and what scope we can deliver for those two elements, and what kind of quality we're bringing. So we can support the business case is really what validation is all about. So in a traditional process, we don't have that validation. In a non-lean world, we're designing it in a vacuum, we're budgeting it in a vacuum, and bidding it. And then we have value engineering to do. And now we start to create this adversarial finger pointing approach. If I work on a lean process, I can greatly reduce the time I spend getting to a point where I can support the business case. And it costs a lot less money. And I have what I can say with certainty is, I know what the program is. I know I can build that program. That's my schedule. I know I can do it for this budget, and I know I can do it for this quality. So the idea of validation is extremely important. And this is where the idea of having an owner, I would say a lean coach involved in that process is really important, or having coaches involved in this process to help guide you through, to help build this culture on your teams, to get to the point where these tools become things you do every day. When I work with teams, I talk to them a lot about the idea that they're already doing things. They're already lean. They're being lean every day, but they don't realize it. And so stories like this one, examples like the ones I gave all morning, really emphasize that you're doing great things every single day. Somebody from the outside world like myself, or a coach that you may hire, what they're going to do is be able to bring those out to the forefront for you and show those project successes. That's how you get more owners involved and more owners enthusiastic about doing this. So in speaking of enthusiasm, we have our, not just to save the date for Congress, I think we have, and this is in October 19th through 22nd in Phoenix for LCI. This is our annual conference. It's our 23rd Congress. We're back in person this year in Phoenix. I've already made my reservations at the hotel, my airline reservations. I've registered for Congress. I'm speaking at Congress. I'm excited to be there. And so hopefully put it on your calendars, start to look into it. The website address is at the bottom there. Please consider being there. It's going to be great to be back in person, and you will get to hear so many other presentations like this one with great information in it. And it's a great way to share this. And that's what I talked about early on in this presentation was really, I'm a resource. I'd like to be a resource for people. Please reach out to me if you have questions. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Contact me on that's my cell phone number. I freely give that information out because I want people to be able to use this as a resource for just finding good information and having somebody to talk to. So Eileen, with that, I think we have about 10 minutes left for Q&A. So I'll let you take it from there and see what we got.
Well, John, since you took most of the time for the presentation and we have a ton of awesome questions, I'm going to make you stay on a little longer.
Okay, that's fine. I'm here as long as we need to be here.
I just wanted to let you know I'm going to ask the questions in the order in which they were received. I also wanted to let you know this is a great time for those plus deltas, and we want that feedback for continuous improvement. So go ahead and put those into the questions box as well. The first question we have is, can you clarify what your definition of, what your definition is of a $10 million project? Is this the total project cost or only the construction cost, specifically the small budgets? What's the definition of that cost?
So on a normal project budget, 80% of the total cost of a project budget is construction. So in this case, the $10 million would primarily cover construction. But in the idea of an integrated form of agreement contract, that includes design, contingency, and construction costs all wrapped in. So that accounts for about 90% of the overall project budget. There's always this 10 or 15% onto the side, which is the FF&E, all the equipment I have to buy in order to outfit that building to be able to use it. So about, to that 10 million is really design, contingency, and the hard costs.
Okay. Our next question is, do you typically have a partnering session during onboarding to align the team, establish vision and conditions of satisfaction and KPI?
Yes, I mean, that's paramount. So the first thing I do when I work with owner teams before we bring on the rest of the team is talk about conditions of satisfaction from their viewpoint. So the first thing we want to do is have a visioning session from them on a strategic level. What are they looking to get out of the project? But then when we bring in the rest of the team, the designers, the trade partners, the contractors, what we want to do is add things to that layer of conditions of satisfaction, and then also establish what our key performance indicators are. These are not all just driven by the owner. These are driven by the entire project team, because we all have stake in the game. And so we all have to be part of that conversation.
Okay. Thank you for that. Our next question is, once you have a track record with a set of trade partners, I can see how this begins to work really well. But with new trades not familiar with IFOAs, do you get much pushback over the cost transparency expected of them on such small projects?
So interesting. What I would say on that one is challenge the network of people that you know. So in the case of if you're looking for a mechanical contractor and you don't have one that is familiar with this or that you might trust, go to your mechanical engineer and say, who do you trust? Who do you think would be great to work in this environment, in this collaborative environment? So interestingly enough, on our first ever integrated project delivery project we did about 6 years ago in Chicago, the mechanical engineer had never worked with us, the client, really anyone on the team before. The mechanical contractor that we've known for 2 decades said, hire this engineer. They will be great for this project delivery. We called the engineer and I said, hey, Ken, are you willing to put your profit at risk with us? You don't know who we are. We've never worked together. And he goes, absolutely. So I took a trusted recommendation from somebody else that I knew and asked the questions and just said, are you willing to do this? And people are going to say no. And some people are going to say yes. People that say yes, bring them in, learn together. So really great case study of somebody that had never worked with us before, but now has had a 6-year track record of working with us because they were willing to take that shot.
Fantastic. Again, I want to remind everybody to put in those plus deltas in the spirit of continuous improvement. We absolutely want that feedback from you. We've gotten some great ones so far, but we want to continue to get that feedback from you. So thank you so much. Our next question is, if it's a small project with a low budget, how can the cost of educating the team members on lean and IPD be managed within the budget and schedule constraints?
So when I work with teams as a lean coach, I don't sit down and do a whole bunch of learning sessions with them. I may do a very quick onboarding, the idea of these key performance indicators, doing a plus deltas, and I kind of sprinkle in the ideas of lean as we go through when we hit a section where it is really important or pertains to us. But I don't want to give you the entire book on lean. I mean, a great resource. I got it sitting on my desk here. This is Transforming Design and Construction, LCI. There's 50 chapters in here, all on different topics within lean. But I'm not going to teach you this entire book in one sitting. So as we approach a project, we're saying we're going to collaborate. And then as we hit a roadblock or we feel like there's an opportunity to bring in maybe 15 or 10 minutes of learning, we'll do that quickly. But I'm not going to sit the whole team down and do 8 hours of set teaching sessions over and over again, because no one will remember anything anyway. And then it'll just go, so pick your key moments and bring key, small learning elements at those moments rather than trying to absorb everything all at one time.
We call that book the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s of Lean, John.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, no,
Yes.
I mean, I got extra copies on my shelf from, anyone that wants one. So
Absolutely. Our next question is 54% has been given in other IPD webinars as the PPC average on 9 IPD projects. So would you agree anything above 54% would be a goal to start with for PPC?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, we laid out and said 85% is what we want to achieve. Now, 54% is interesting because that feels like a very low number, but think about it. That means you're doing half. There's no right or wrong number. If you're doing one thing that you said you were going to do in a week, that's a start. What you want to do, though, if you're trending at 54% and you want to get higher and you want to go further, you want to get to 60, 70%, you really need to track how you're missing on a weekly basis. The other 50% of things you're not getting done, figure out why you're not getting them done. Give it a reason why you didn't get it done, and then sit down as a group and look at the root cause analysis of why it's not happening. Then you'll start to see the power, and you'll start to see that level raise up higher and higher, because you'll start to then change behaviors of what's happening within your project teams. So yeah, start at 50%. There's no right or wrong answer on that.
Okay. We have a really quick question for you. You had shown the slide of your dashboard. You said dashboards were very important. What's the software that you used for that particular dashboard, and would you recommend a particular software for dashboards in general?
So that software was something called Microsoft Excel. We've all heard of that. Nothing too crazy. Microsoft has a program called Power BI, which pulls in a lot of information from a lot of different resources. You can use that. There are project management software programs that have dashboards. Don't limit yourself to the software, and use something you're comfortable with. Make it easy to update. You don't want to make it too cumbersome, because then you won't do it. So make it easy to update, and then become more sophisticated the further on you get. But get comfortable with something, even if it's a handwritten sheet of paper to start with, or a chart on your wall where you put little tick marks. That's okay too. It can be way analog for PPC tracking, anything like that. And then we can bring it into a level like Excel, or then move further into like Microsoft Power BI or something like that, where you're bringing in all your different computer programs. But I always go to the Toyota way lesson of only use proven technology and use it as a assistant to you, but that will not replace the work itself.
We have an interesting comment here that I'd like to get your perspective on. The comment is, it's important for healthcare to change delivery of healthcare to drive down costs. What are your thoughts on that?
So healthcare, changing the delivery of healthcare, is something that we talked about in the last segment. Really, the idea of, we have these hospitals. We need the hub and spoke concept. And the hub and spoke concept is going to exist for a long time. But the sickest people are the ones that are going to be coming to our hospitals. And what we found recently is that hospital organizations are now making specialized hospitals. So consolidating efforts for orthopedics or cardiology into one specific hospital, so that it becomes the hub and center for everyone to go to. But we build these small immediate care sites out there because, number one, the insurers are saying do this at a lower cost. And there's so many things that you can do by just walking into an immediate care site to get a little, stitches, or to get a shot, or do something like that, where you don't have to go to the hospital or even one of your big medical office buildings. So yeah, the healthcare is changing. If anything, the last year and a half has taught us that healthcare has changed a lot. We saw those immediate care sites that we built. The volume increased by twofold, because people were comfortable going there versus going to a hospital where you have a lot of really sick people. So we saw visits like that going way up. We see e-visits going up, things like that. But we still need the brick and mortar places to go. It's just going to look different. Definitely is going to look different.
This one came in right after you mentioned that IFOA, it wouldn't be necessarily beneficial to do IFOA under a certain monetary level of project.
Right.
So this one wasn't the IPD style of agreement, the IFOA, inspired by small scale projects?
So the IPD agreement was actually inspired by large scale projects in healthcare on the West Coast when it came to retrofitting hospitals to make them earthquake safe. So after the earthquakes that happened in the 80s and 90s in the San Francisco Bay Area, there had to be ways to develop project teams that could work efficiently and effectively without understanding the full scope of work when you brought them on board. And so bringing a collaborative team together early, those are expensive because they were starting to collaborate on retrofits for hospitals and make them earthquakes safe. And then it became something that now these big mega projects they're doing to rebuild brand new hospitals. So, looking back on it, those early like Sutter Health type projects really centered around retrofitting hospitals. I don't know what the costs of those things were, but I had to imagine they were very large dollar sums to retrofit a hospital so that it doesn't fall down during, the Northridge earthquake or whatever that was back in the late 80s, early 90s. So, I think the reason why I emphasize small projects in the conversations I talk about is because it's something I see all the time. In Chicago, we're not building billion-dollar projects really of any size other than maybe the big tall buildings downtown. A lot of our projects are retrofits and rehab projects, and that's why it's so important to talk about IPD for small projects in my mind.
Our next question is, do you think the CPM, competitive profile matrix, is a useful tool to compare yourself to competitors in the market?
Yeah, I think so. I don't do much in the way of looking at that, but I think there is definitely, there's definitely opportunities to use it. And I guess it's a matter of putting in the right data to get the right data back out. So if you're putting in the wrong data or anything like that, you're not going to get the right output. So you have to be smart about how you put information in order to get good information back out. And I would say a lot of it is you trust your gut is what I always go to first. Is I look at my gut and I look at who are my competitors in that marketplace, and what are the differentiators that I can put forth for myself. So you have to understand your own business before you can go compare yourself to somebody else.
This came in when you were mentioning handoffs.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, how can you make sure about the success of the handoff? What can you do to ensure that?
So when we're talking about handoffs in a last planner system, the handoff on the actual tag that we write out there's a connection point between who we're handing the work to, and there's a connection point on the next tag of who we're getting work from. So we're actually identifying that on the tag. If there are constraints that happen, we're going to put that on a constraint log. And again, we're identifying where the constraint is, whose ball and court it resides in. So we're trying to bring transparency to the idea of who's handing off work to who. And if it doesn't happen, we need to give a reason why it didn't happen. And so that's this whole element of being transparent and being good communicators with each other to say, I need this from you tomorrow in order for me to keep going. And these are the 3 things I need from you in order to do that, whatever. So there's this conversation that happens that's back and forth. That's how we know it gets done, is if that tag can draw a line through it and say it's done, that means that handoff did occur. Hopefully well, because the communication happened in a solid manner.
Okay, I do want to remind people now's a great time to keep on putting in those plus deltas. We absolutely want that feedback. We've been getting some great ones. Go ahead and put those in for us. Our next question is, how do you handle labor and material cost escalation, over the time that you build the projects?
So if it's a very large project, we're going to see that because we're going to have durations that last. In our world in Chicago, we're in a union market, so we know pretty well what our labor rate increases are going to be year over year, and they happen in June. So we know if a project starts to take place in July and is going to be done before June, we're not going to see a labor rate increase. But what we will see is material increases. So how do we handle that? We handle that with, again, with transparency. We understand as an owner organization that we're going to have to at times see that cost increase. And as long as the team presents it to us in a manner that is open and honest and is done as quickly as they possibly can, then I'm willing to listen to it. If the day before material arrives on my site, I get a phone call that says it's not going to be there, I'm not going to be very forgiving about that because you didn't think about the job. You're reacting now instead of being proactive, which is what I would expect. Don't be reactive, be proactive, be open and honest with the clients. Don't be afraid to tell them that information because it's powerful. It may help them make a decision faster if they know it's going to impact cost, schedule, time, everything else. So, I would say we have to account for that and be open to maybe have a change order on the project. What it may drive as an owner is making a tough decision where I have to reduce a scope item or a quality item somewhere in order to pay for that increase in cost because I have a one top dollar value level and I can't go above that. So how do I do this? I may have to decrease scope or quality somewhere else in order to pay for that increase in cost for materials. Just some of the hard choices you have to make.
Our next question is, do you use mock-ups on small projects during design?
So I think mock-ups are incredibly important. In the case of like a medical office building or really any office building where you're doing repetitive work, a mock-up is fantastic, especially early. You can do it with cardboard materials to lay out the room. You can do it with 3D goggles. There's many ways to do it, but what mock-ups are going to do is reduce that. If you look at the 8 wastes of construction, it's going to reduce defects. It's going to reduce overproduction, inventory. There's a lot of things that it's going to reduce. So mock-ups are incredibly important, especially if you're building something new that you've never built before or adding in new elements. If it's something you've done before, your mock-up is over there in that other building. And so go look in that building because that's where we're going to build over here. That's nice to have that if you have a standardized set that you keep building. If you have something brand new, great to mock it up, look at it, have everyone say, yeah, that meets our expectations. And then you can go forward and repeat that over and over again. There's no sense in building 20 rooms and then having all 20 be incorrect. Now, I say this, and I just had an example myself the other day where we didn't do a mock-up, and I had to reframe a small little paper towel dispenser holder space in 24 rooms. Shame on me. I didn't mock it up, and now I have a problem where I have a $1,000 change order to reframe 24 rooms. So I don't even, in every case, now we're not all perfect. Shame on me. And I learned for next time what I have to do. So
Lessons learned, right?
Lessons learned. Every day you get a new one.
Our next question is, during the pre-construction phase on a smaller project, how much level of effort is required from a GC? Is this a 100% commitment from one individual?
So during pre-con, if it's a small project, especially, I'm not expecting them to be at every design meeting. The important thing is getting the message out to all of your key partners so that they can deliver the pricing checks you need, the information you need back from them, because there's this back and forth. So having a key stakeholder sit in every single meeting may not be necessary. So I would say really look at what the owner expectations are for you to be there and have that conversation with the owner about what they expect from you. Do they want you there 40 hours a week, every single day? Maybe, but that costs a lot of money. So there's probably going to be some trade-off to that. And in the case of a project we're doing right now, which is very large, we're talking to the contractor teams about being there maybe at every other meeting instead of every single week with our users, or be prepared to be in a meeting every other week for like 4 hours. And so we're giving them the expectation of what we want so that they know what to price and what to deliver on, rather than having them guess and be wrong and then lose money. That's not beneficial to me or anybody else. So I would rather tell them what I want than have somebody try to guess.
Our Our next question, and I received some clarification on this, so it might be a little long, and I apologize.
Okay.
So how do you talk the owner out of their capital process? How do you talk them out of, it says FEL1, FEL2, and FEL3? And I asked for clarification on that, and I said business case design and first capital stage funding concept, case design and second capital stage funding, basis of design, final capital stage for funding.
Okay. So that sounds like a very client-specific type process that they have. How do you get people to work outside of their comfort zone a little bit when you're talking about project delivery? And sometimes it's helpful to not to plug myself or anybody, but it's helpful to bring somebody, if they're willing to listen, to bring somebody in from the outside who's worked and experienced something other than what you've done in the past. And we've worked with the IFOA contract, we've worked with GMP contracts, lumps, any kind of contract you could imagine we have. So the idea would be to understand how your process could fit into or be molded to, let's say, using this type of contract or getting contractors on board earlier. So in that stage gate process that was just identified, could you put dollars in the first stage gate approval to do these early onboarding sessions or meetings like I talked about with bringing the team in while I'm negotiating with the real estate agent? I also brought my team in. How did I do that? I asked the client for dollars up front to do this investigative work. So I'm asking for approval to spend dollars earlier in the project process. And so you can do that in these stage gates concepts by bringing dollars in earlier, maybe to procure materials that you know are a long lead time, to write a PO to a vendor that you know is a 14-week lead time. Put those dollars in to do that procurement early on in one of those early stage gates rather than waiting till the very end. And so that lets you get started sooner. So that might be an avenue to try to do that if I understood what they were asking.
Okay, we have a couple more questions, so we're almost to the end. I want to remind people, put in those plus deltas. We absolutely want that feedback. Now's a great time to do it, and let us know what it is you're thinking about our webinar. Our next question is, how do you ensure profits to partners? In your example, the architect was costing more, but the other partners were doing okay and could help out. How does this work?
So what we do is we look at the overall profit pool on an IFOA contract. We're going to, each contractor trade is and consultant is going to identify how much profit they're expecting. And we build this profit pool. And the profit pool is, let's say the profit pool on a $10 million project is $300,000, right? What we're going to identify is each one of those people that put dollars into that pool, they own a percentage of that profit. So in the case of the architect, it may be 5% of that profit is what they are expecting. And what I'm going to track, and there's a lot of other information I can provide on how the contract works and all the details about the dollars. But really what I'm doing is I'm tracking if at the bottom line, I still have a number that's in the black. I then can divvy up returned dollars that I get from one trade to give to the other trade. In that case, the architect. Because what I'm doing is I'm managing to the bottom line. The profit in those numbers that you saw is all set aside. It was removed from those numbers. Those were raw labor, material, and overhead costs. Profit was aside from those numbers. So this is really about their raw labor, material, and overhead efforts that they were providing on the project. This profit we take out and we put over there for a while in this bucket over here, and we don't think about that as we work on the project, if that makes sense.
The last question
if that person has, like, if they want to get into greater detail, I have a couple other things that really explain the, kind of minutia that I don't always put into a presentation because it's, it's a lot.
Got it. So, yep, you see John's contact information there. If you have anything else that you'd like to speak with him about, please give him a call or shoot him an email.
Yeah.
Our last question is regarding the big room. How are you balancing the value of the big room versus the time available due to lower fees on smaller projects?
So it's a good point. Again, like we set an expectation. So sometimes you're going to feel like you're pressed for time. In the case of a $10 million building, you may be able to get through all your target value delivery concepts, basically all the design meetings you need, let's say in 6 to 8 meetings, depending on how high the team is in collaborating. That's 6 to 8 2-hour meetings. So 1 meeting a week, 2 hours for 8 weeks. That's it. That's all we got. And so the decision-making process and and how we bring out that risk register and that opportunity tracker with all those decisions we have to make, that's really important to prioritize what the owner needs to make on a weekly basis in order to keep the ball rolling forward. So in that case, I don't want to be the person that shows up to the meeting on week 2, not being able to provide answers from week 1. So I have to do my homework too in order to keep the team moving forward, because the expectation is we only have 8 meetings to do all this in. And we set ourselves a goal of like 8 meetings or 6 meetings, whatever it might be, because we don't want to just sit there and get into analysis paralysis. So let's push ourselves to really dig down and get through all of the gobbledygook and really get to the heart of what we're trying to decide, make those decisions and move forward. We'll have time to do the onboarding and the fun stuff as we go through the project, but these 2 hours in the big room collaborating at a high level, we have to really be good stewards of everyone's time. And having an agenda that lays out exactly what we're going to do and how long we have, and sticking to that is very respectful of people's time and effort. And you're like, wait, I need 1 more minute. No, this is the time we had. Finish the process, finish what you were analyzing, and let's go. So you gotta be tough a little bit, which is sometimes hard for people to get out of their comfort zone. So.
Well, fantastic. LCI would like to thank John for presenting our webinar and all of you for hanging on with us. I do want to remind you a copy of the recording and the slide deck will be sent to everybody, hopefully by COB today. A copy of all of the questions and of your plus deltas will also be sent to John as well, so he can get back in touch with you and learn from all of the feedback that we got from today's webinar. So again, thank you all for attending, and we hope to see you at our next webinar. Bye, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.